Hello and welcome to another episode of Father and Joe. I am Joe Rockey here with Father Boniface Hicks. And Father, today I want to do a conversation about people in the Bible, but not the ones that we normally talk about. Because I think that sometimes these conversations can really be illuminating about our life, where we're at, and just kind of looking at the Bible in a different way, I think is a rewarding experience. So today I want to zoom in on something that the church readings will be taking into a couple of weeks from now, which is when Jesus enters into Jerusalem, he is behold, he is celebrated, they are loving him, they're clearing the way, they're basically throwing a parade for him as he shows up. And so he's instant celebrity, like guy we're looking up to. This is awesome. Listen to this guy. And I just imagine myself being one of the money changers, not necessarily the first one he goes to, who's doing his job that the priests conceivably and presumably told him to do, or at least told this industry to exist. And he thinks he's doing the right thing, by all the norms and customs of the world. And you're looking across the marketplace as it's a marketplace, so that by definition has a lot of stuff selling in it. And you're seeing the celebrity that our entire people is loving and adoring, yelling effectively at your coworker and flipping all the tables over. So I was thinking about that, like that guy has to go through a lot of different experiences. On the one hand, he thought he was doing things the right way. He thought he was doing a profession that maybe not noble, but certainly approved and encouraged by the church elders. And now we're seeing Jesus say no in about the most emphatic way. He says no to anything in the entire Bible, at least in terms of this is wrong. And I'm showing everyone that's here in this public square that they're going to see it. So that's the Bible part that struck to me. And some of the other thoughts were, that easily could be happening in my life now and not even realizing it. I'm doing stuff that I think is right and correct, but, I'm going to get judged the same way as that profession was one day. How do we go about and thinking about this in modern context? So I know it's not exactly a normal route of thinking about the Bible. It's from someone whose name isn't even said, but it's a thought that came to me as I was getting preparation for this episode.
Interestingly, it dovetails nicely with the homily that I gave this morning.
Oh, how about that?
When we're recording this, the readings are about the selling of Joseph, the patriarch, into slavery, and the tenants who kill the landowner's servants and son in order to keep the vineyard. And a kind of similar idea around how we can start to think, in the story of Joseph, it almost seems like Judah is the hero because unlike his brothers, Judah intervenes not to kill Joseph, but only to sell him into slavery. And it's like, how did we move so far from Joseph is totally innocent, but it's kind of better that they didn't kill him. And somehow it's better that he only got sold into slavery. It's like, but that's how we can kind of steadily be influenced by corruption. Pope Francis used the image at one point of how corruption in terms of power and processes works like a stench in a room, that as you're in the room for a while, you stop noticing the stench and you need someone from the outside to come in. You need fresh air. You need somebody who is not in the stench to be able to point it out to you. And in general, that's what the scriptures should be doing for us. That's what our practice of the faith should be doing for us. That's what the magisterium of the church should be doing for us. That's what our own Christian lives and witness should be doing for each other. We should be constantly upholding the ideals. So we're all going to fall short. We're all going to sin. We're all going to struggle. And we're even going to justify that at times. But when it becomes an institution, it becomes corruption. When we surround ourselves, and that's the case in both of those readings I mentioned from daily mass on whenever it was Friday of the third week of Lent or second week of Lent, but they're surrounded. It's a number of tenants. It's a number of brothers. When we start to get into groupthink, then we start to accept things that we wouldn't have accepted on our own, or we wouldn't have accepted in the face of the group thinking the opposite. And so we have to be so careful who we surround ourselves with, lest we get caught up in that kind of groupthink and start to give into and accept as normal processes and procedures that are corrupt, that are immoral, that are unethical, that are abusive, that are using power to dominate and control rather than to serve and to build up. So all of those forms of corruption. And so the good money changers, that is to say, good-hearted, sincere, first of all, might have wondered, and there may have been money changers that refused to sell in the temple because they actually understood that's not really the place for it. So those people might have already exempted themselves. Others who are somehow neutral kind of go with the flow, see the economic opportunity, doesn't seem to be a problem. Certain religious authorities are accepting it, and so figure it's fine. They might actually be grateful that Jesus made such a dramatic demonstration to wake them up, because they find themselves working against God's law, and maybe in their hearts really didn't want to do that, but kind of went with the flow. And that's Jordan Peterson likes to point out that, when he sort of was fascinated with some of the massive corruption that occurred in Germany and Russia, in some of these really these regimes that did really evil things. Like, how did the concentration camps actually develop? Like, how did systematic execution of 6 million Jews and 6 million additional people beyond that, 12 million people were were killed, most of them systematically executed by the Nazis? Like, Hitler didn't do that personally. Who went along with him? And there's a book called Ordinary Men that Jordan Peterson has pointed out that, like a regular police corps, so whatever, a troop of 100 regular policemen, 30s, 40s, 50s, were enlisted and then told to, brought to a ditch where there were a bunch of Jews and told to shoot them. And it was the rare one or two who actually resisted. Everybody else followed orders. Everybody else went along lockstep. Everybody else fell in line. So when I'm saying these things, I really appreciate Jordan Peterson's insight. Like, we would like to think we're going to be the hero. We would like to think we're going to be the guy that stands up and doesn't accept that. Chances are that's not true. It's the rare person, the very rare person. But when there's one who does stand up, it gives courage to the rest. And so the ones who might be going with the flow and they see Jesus stand up might have actually encouraged them to say, like, yeah, why are we doing this? Where does this come from? This isn't my faith. And so they might have actually had some strength from his example, and then walked away from it and said, yeah, I'm doing something different. We're selling this in a different place. I'm doing a different business. And the ones who are promoting the corruption, who are, the sort of the Hitlers, or only a degree or two removed from him, they might really fight against it. They might even take up authorities against him. The Chosen series brings that out, that there were those who lost property, and had their animals set free and had their money turned over, who started making a case with the authorities to actually fight against Jesus. So that's kind of the range of things. The one or two who already didn't participate, the many who are going with the flow and would be grateful that their wrong is being pointed out in such a strong way. And then the few who are actually corrupt and are reinforcing that whole process, who are really going to fight against it. And then, I think in different areas we fall, it's in different places with all of that. We probably have stronger convictions maybe in some places than in others. We might be going along with the flow in some areas. It's like, well, nobody turns in their whatever gas receipts or something, and so I'm not going to make a case out of this. I just go with the flow in this accounting practice or something. But in another area, maybe I have real convictions and I'm trying to promote some ethical behavior, and I'm willing to stand up and stand out for that.
So, okay, there's a lot there to unpack. So, first off, I guess I got to clarify about what Jesus is upset about, because in the situation of the police officers being corrupted across the line to murder, that's pretty black and white. You don't murder people, especially those you are hired to protect. That's pretty straightforward. I guess this is two questions. Obviously, Jesus is upset where the activity is happening. And now I apologize, I'm drawing off memory and could be completely misrepresenting this. But I also believe that somewhere near that account is also when Jesus says, render up to Caesar what is Caesar's, but render your heart up to God. I think that's all in like the same chapter area. I might be mixing that up a little bit. But the reason I'm bringing that up is because my question is okay, I get it's wrong that it's happening in the sacred space of the temple, in our terms, church. But is the practice itself, is the industry wrong and evil? And I guess that's the other part that I'm not understanding. Like, because I look at this from the one stance is like, if there's nothing immoral about the industry, it's not being a hitman, it's not being something that's blatantly wrong. It's in some ways a job that the church is encouraging. So therefore, I'm just kind of signing up for orientation and exactly what you said, going with the flow, and probably really didn't think about it aside from the fact that, we got to buy milk later today, and, this is how I get paid to do it. Just like, I guess there's been so many people who've defended evil decisions by the mortgage theory. Everyone's got a mortgage to pay and just listen to your boss, which I guess all of this stuff could fall under. But that's basically where my question is, and trying to point out how easy it is that when we have needs, which we all have economic needs, how we can not look into things. And more importantly, what I'm trying to get across from here is how many things are we oblivious to in our day-to-day life that we aren't looking at, whether it be professionally or morally or in another arena. So that was kind of my trying to clarify there, because again, the Hitler part's obvious, but I'm not totally clear as far as, and again, this could be the 2,000 years removed of culture. Aside from doing it in the wrong neighborhood, effectively, what is wrong with the practice of the currency exchange?
Yeah, anyway, it's a fair question. Yeah, what they're doing is not intrinsically evil. It's the matter of desecrating the temple that's the problem. Desecrating the temple is intrinsically evil. So
okay, so it's the where. If they would have done the same thing half a mile away, no one would care.
That's right.
Okay. So effectively, so the sin is not being reverent and respecting God.
Yeah, the temple, that's what Jesus cries out. My house is a house of prayer, and you have made it a den of thieves now. So there's probably also corruption going on in the selling and some things like that. Now, he's quoting from prophets, so I don't know where the accusations are exactly. But yeah, setting up shop in the temple is desecrating the temple. It's bringing the marketplace. It's turning the temple into a marketplace. And so that's desecrating the temple. The temple is to be set aside for God.
Which makes sense. God is supposed to be above all else in your world. Quite frankly, it also makes sense that you put the marketplace where the people are. I mean, location. It's the first thing they teach you. So in real estate, at least, and the same thing will be true then. where people congregate, there's always someone selling something. It pretty much doesn't even matter what they're congregating for. If there's enough people, someone will be there selling something. And that's a human nature thing.
Yeah. So to add a little bit of a wrinkle to it, without diminishing anything we've talked about so far, so there's also a prophetic dimension to this, and specifically where they were set up in the temple was called the Courtyard of the Gentiles, and that was a part of the temple that was set aside so that the Gentiles, those who would be curious, who would be drawn to Jewish worship, could come close to it. So you had the courtyard of the Gentiles, the courtyard of the women, the courtyard of the men, the sanctuary, and then the inner sanctuary. That was the concentric circles that went towards the center, the inner sanctuary being the Holy of Holies. And the Gentiles could come within the temple. And that was part of the design, which had its own, interesting quality to it, its own prophetic quality to it, that the Jews were not meant to be, well, that there was always going to be this kind of openness to the Gentiles. And that shows up in the prophets, that God is revealing himself through the Jews, but for the sake of the salvation of the whole world. The universal mission of God through the Jews, realized in the coming of the Messiah, who is also God in Jesus Christ, was already prefigured in the temple, that there would be a room for the Gentiles in the temple. So there's also a prophetic image going on that I learned from Pope Benedict. His explanation of this passage was that Jesus was, basically that courtyard of the Gentiles had fallen into disuse, because in practice, no Gentiles were coming into the courtyard of the Gentiles. So it was a big empty space on the way into the rest of the temple. And so it looked just like a courtyard. And so the idea that you'd set up shop for changing coins, which you couldn't bring Caesar's coins in, and that you'd also set up shop for selling the animal sacrifices, which the people needed in order to offer at the temple and sacrifice, it made total sense to set up in there. As you said, location, and nobody's using this anyway. And the Jews had lost sight of the openness to the Gentiles. So Jesus is coming in and making a declaration. Salvation is from the Jews, but it is for everyone. And his mission is also universal. We get glimpses of that at different points along the way with the Syrophoenician woman, who he says, the dogs, whatever, the children, the children get are being fed, and then she says, but even the dogs get the scraps from the table. And he says, great is your faith, woman. And so he does a number of things in Gentile territory. He engages the Gentiles in different ways. The Samaritan woman is this Sunday's gospel as we're recording, and his outreach to Samaria as their disaffected Jews who have mingled with the nations. So again, his clearing out the courtyard of the Gentiles is declaring now, from God's perspective, I'm making room. Furthermore, when he's doing this in John's gospel, he's also saying, tear down this temple and I'll build it up again in 3 days, because he's referring to the temple of his body. And so he's making a declaration about the mystical body of the church having room for all the nations. Now, this is so obvious and taken for granted for us because we don't even conceive of a Christianity which isn't universal. But it wasn't until the Council of Jerusalem, it wasn't until Peter went into the household of Cornelius in Acts chapter 10, it wasn't for some time after Pentecost that the apostles actually accepted the universal mission of the church. And so these are the kinds of things they're looking back on at that point to understand that this was always part of Jesus's intention. Although he's being sent to the Jews in obedience to the Father and in faithfulness to the covenant, the covenant is expanded. The new and eternal covenant, the covenant of Jeremiah from chapter 31, is now going to be universalized. The covenant made with Abraham becomes and Moses becomes a universal covenant in Jesus Christ. And so this kind of prophetic image is doing more than just telling people to stop misbehaving.
Yeah, that there's so much more to that than, like, I'm glad I brought this up, because I always took it on a surface level. Guy was selling something somewhere he wasn't supposed to, and the depth of what's really going on there is massive. And to me, it makes logical sense from all standpoints. Everything you said, there's free space in here. We're gonna do it here. It's where they need to buy this stuff and bring the correct coin, the correct offering in as it is. Quite frankly, there's probably something of the priest who are getting a landlord cut opposed to the guy who owns a building across the street, in which they don't get anything in that. So there is that personal incentive, personal buy-in there. But to the larger extent of what you're saying, of this just overturns the way that they were looking at it. And I think that this is going to carry into the next conversation I want to have for next week, which will be how in a week can people go from you are my celebrity, you are my God, you are my Messiah, to chanting crucify him. And that's what we're going to talk about next week. We thank you all for watching us. And for those who are starting to finding us on YouTube, we appreciate it very much. That is now probably the easiest way to communicate with us, Father and Joe at YouTube. Leave a message in the comments and we will get back to you either through that comment or bringing it up in an upcoming episode. So thank you guys very much for sharing and consuming us wherever you are.